Hello everyone. So my name is Silvija, and today I am going to talk about the nature of prayer at Joseph Ratzinger or Benedict XVI, the Pope Emeritus today. Here you see also my email down, so if you would like, if you have any questions, anything what is interesting, important for you, please, you can always contact me. We can always discuss some parts, some aspects of this. Also, at the end of this presentation, I prepared 3 questions. So if you are interested, please stay with me till the end and to hear also those 3 questions. So those 3 questions are just can be good start for thinking and then for exploring deeper certain aspects of this presentation. As I said, this is about the nature of prayer, Joseph Ratzinger. What is important to explain here is that I'm not theologian, so this presentation speaks about the nature of prayer, but not exclusively from theologian perspective. So it's important just to mention this. And you will see there is a lot of things that we will just skip because whenever, if you know Ratzinger and how he approaches the things, he is always thinking and writing much deeper, and he always goes into the background and into the essence of certain things before he came back to the main topic. In this case, this is the nature of prayer, and before he starts to speak about the nature of prayer. So before that, there is a lot of very important background, core, essential things. So we will just fly and just stop at few certain points which are important in that background part, let's say like that, before we start to speak actually about the nature of prayer. So, I mean, this is because Ratzinger always has such an approach, because he always wants to understand things very well before continue with the exact topic. So, in this case, the nature of prayer, Joseph Ratzinger. Here, of course, one of the essential central core things is the question of what is true and what is good. And how we go to this presentation, you will see that all the time we will come back to this question: what is true, what is good, and why this is important to know, why this is important to have such awareness and such a knowledge. Because one of the thing is that absolutely to know what is good, what is true, is connected with certain values, which is connected with creation of certain laws, certain orders, certain rules, and this is connected with how the world functions, what the things, how the things are organized, and what is the common good, and what we are going to do, and how we are going to organize our life. I mean, here you can just see that humanity as such has that natural tendency toward the true and toward the good, and this is a source of dynamism which generates desire to collaborate in order to realize the common good. And this is something which is very important. Then later is connected with the question of power, with the question of authority, with the question who has such a power, such authority, such a right to say, okay, this is right and this is good and this is correct and this is good, and something else is not. It's not good. It's not correct. It's not right. I mean, I just want to say that this is very important in his approach and way of thinking. And I can't go into the details in each of these aspects, but this is one of the aspects what you can see here. Also, another aspect before we start to talk about the nature of prayer is about the prayer itself from historical perspective, and from the perspective which includes all the humanity, so which goes far in the past before Christianity also, and also he speaks about the Christianity as such. You will see he mentioned he describes Christianity as a certain kind of a philosophy of freedom. So this is something we will just go very briefly through this, but just to mention why this is so important. One of the things he also he speaks here about the relation between reason and religion, and the reason and religion are not so divided and so contrary as it looks like at the first glance, for example, but they are much more connected. This is also one of the background things. Another background things is about today's global society with its mechanisms of power and views that society constitutes certain laws, certain morality. So again, this is about what is important, what is true, and based on this global modern society that constitutes certain rules. Then again, for Ratzinger, one of those background things is also intercultural dimension, because, as I said, he speaks not only and exclusively about Christianity, and he doesn't speak always only and exclusively from Christian perspective. He always take into consideration intercultural dimension, because, as he said, it's very important because any discussion can't be carried on exclusively either within the Christian realm or within the Western rational thought and the Western way of thinking, since they are accepted only by parts of mankind and they are comprehensible only in the parts of mankind. So it's important, Ratzinger says, to include other cultures in the attempt to understand how the things are, to enter that universal process of purification, so that ultimately essential values and norms that are in some way known or sensed by all men will take on a new brightness in such a process, so that which holds the world together can once again become an effective force in mankind. So this is something which is very important to understand about Ratzinger. He is never ever only about Christianity. He is never ever only about something like narrow-minded. I mean, he always considers absolutely and totally mankind in a whole. He always takes into consideration other traditions, other cultures, other philosophies. I just wanted to say that as a very important background, also if we are going to speak about the nature of prayer. Then he speaks about the peace. Peace also is not only absence of war, as we know. Peace is much more. It's about weak vision of the person, perception of the person, which then leave room for every conception, even if the most bizarre, and in reality hinders authentic dialogue and opens the way to authoritarian impositions, leaving the person defenseless and as a result easy prey to oppression and violence. I mean, so this is all the background of the topic of the question of the peace. So also very important, but we can't go, of course, here into this part also. As well as he speaks again about the reason and the control of the reason and control of the religion, and he speaks about pathology of reason, as well as pathology of religions. I mean, we can't go through this, but also he speaks about something he called the malnutrition of the soul, which is about loss of personal power and about lack of respect for human dignity. And so such things are also background things if we are going to talk about the prayer. but as I said, we can't go in those essentials. I have to skip this, and I have to come actually to speak about as we can see, about the Christianity and what is the most important for Christians. I mean, we all know that it's impossible to say something about Christianity in a few words and 10 sentences, but I will try to do my best following Ratzinger's thought. Of course, this is very important because if we are going to speak about prayer, then we should try to understand what that prayer means, not only in historical overview, but also in Christian context. And so if we are going to pray to someone or to something, that we should supposed to understand what does it mean and how Ratzinger looks this within the frame of Christianity. About the Christianity, the shortest of the shortest possible in this moment is to say that he said, for example, that the most important thing for any Christian is that we become persons who love, and that we realize our likeness to Christ, as St. John says, he is love, God, he is love, and desires that there be creatures similar to him, who freely choosing to love, become like him, belong to him, and in so doing manifest his splendor. So regarding Ratzinger, this is also the question of the power of that God, of such a God to whom we are going to pray. So it's important to understand what the power is in Christian context, and that this is the highest power. In this case, is demonstrated as the calm willingness completely to renounce all power. And we are shown that it's powerful not through force, but only through freedom of love, which even when it's rejected is stronger than all the exultant powers of earthly violence. So here we see what is definition of the real power within Christianity. So this is very important. Even if we are going to talk about the prayer, we have to understand who is that God, what is with his power, where it is. So, and in this context, we speak already about the freedom of love. This also leads further to explain. So, in the early times of Christianity and the first beginning of the Christian Church and Christianity. When it was discussion about which kind of God it is in Christian context, just to remember that was the ancient times of ancient Roman and Greek thoughts, and then that was the closest environment where the Christianity begins. So it's they said in those times that they are for the God of the philosophers and against the gods of various religions, and that early church resolutely put aside the whole cosmos of the ancient religions and explained that its faith is about the God, that this is God above all powers, that alone is our God, they said. And they made the choice that opting for the logos as against any kind of myth. So it means the definitive demythologization of the world and of religion. So that was in the beginning. And in the beginning, they, by deciding exclusively in favor of the God of the philosophers and logically declaring this God to be the God who speaks to men and to whom one can pray. So this is very important to understand to whom we are going to pray. Christian faith gave a completely new significance to this God of the philosophers. So removing him from the purely academic realm and thus profoundly transforming him. So it's not anymore like in a Greek thought that now this is God who had been understood, because before that God has been understood as pure being or pure thought, closed in upon itself without reaching over to man and his little world. But now And this pure eternity and unchangeability had excluded any relation with the changeable and transitory, with people, with their small world and their problems, now appears to the eye of faith as the God of men, who is not only thought of all thoughts, the eternal mathematics of the universe, but who is also agape, the power of creative love. So this is that the newest thing within the Christianity, and for Ratzinger is very important to understand this before we are going to talk about prayer, before we are going to talk about anything else. And so he continues that this is about the freedom. So Christian belief in God means that things are being taught. Okay, this is philosophy, but just a little bit of philosophy. Of a creative consciousness, of a creative freedom, and that the creative consciousness that bears of all the things has released what has been taught into the freedom of its own. So it's in independent existence, and then it is all about creative freedom that creates further freedoms. So in this way, as I mentioned before, we can describe Christianity as a philosophy of freedom, where at the summit stands a freedom that thinks, and by thinking creates other freedoms from love. So it's about that freedom, that conscious who creates other freedoms, thus making freedom the structural form of all being. So in Ratzinger, and if you are going to read him, you will find this is how he understands Christianity in the background of the background, in the essence of the essence of the thing. So of course, if we are going to talk about such a freedom, which is created from love, and which is connected, love and freedom are connected. So this also means and includes the incalculability, certain, of course, implied is an essential part of the world. So that incalculability, so it's an implication of freedom. And of course, this brings in on the stage into the light the question of evil. So, but and the mystery of demonic, as he says. But of course, we can't go here. But this is just something he wants to be aware, to know that this, if we are going to talk about the freedom, that we are going to talk about the other side of the same coin, and about the risk of evil, as he says. Anyway. In fact, by creating free creatures, by giving us freedom, God renounced some of his power, as before we made the definition of what is the power in the Christian context. So God, in this way, renounced some of his power, allowing for the power of our freedom. And thus, he loves and respects the free responses of love to his call. Also, this is something that Ratzinger called sapientia Christiana, but again, we can't go to this. This integrates faith and life. So, because for Ratzinger, it's very important what we are doing. It's not only about the theories and about nice words. It's about our concrete deeds. So, who is my neighbor, and how I'm going to treat my neighbor concretely in everyday life. So for him, this is absolutely very important. It is crucial, and so we can go through all this. I just can say here that for Ratzinger, the truth, of course, if we are going to talk about freedom, if we are going to talk about love, that of course we are also going to talk about freedom, about truth, and for Ratzinger, the truth is in person, and that person is Jesus from Nazareth. So this is very important, just to really emphasize here that for Ratzinger, truth is a person, and that person is Jesus from Nazareth. So this is his really crucial point and starting point for everything else. Of course, it's about the role of the church, which also we can't go in. But now let's go to see finally about the prayer more. So for now and till now we just skipped and passed really quickly through those aspects, to those background things of the prayer, which means to know what is truth, what is good, the question of freedom, the question of love, the understanding of the Christianity as such, and what the truth is for Joseph Ratzinger. And now another part is about the essence of prayer, and from his certain historical perspective, and very briefly, very shortly, for Ratzinger, the essence of prayer from ancient times is a part of the search for God. And this includes, for example, to see God, that was in ancient Egypt, or includes the problem of own guilt, as well as divine mercy and goodness, which it was the case in Mesopotamia. So, as you can see here, we are talking about times before Christianity. So, as I said, he is not only and exclusively about Christianity. Also, it was about invoking divine help to obtain heavenly favors in every circumstances of daily life, to deepen the relationship with God and to become a better person, to be beautiful within and wise. Also, desire to know God and to worship His Majesty, the one who guides the ways of the world. That was the case in ancient Greece. Or as in the example of Romans, when the prayer was the request for divine protection of life of the civil community, also desire for a more authentic relationship with God, need to pray in order to establish a fruitful cooperation between divine action and human action. So it was in Romans case. However, whichever situation is, before Christianity, as I said, with Christianity or without Christianity, the human beings has that this is crucial, that awareness of his central condition and on his dependence on another superior to himself and the source of every good. So again, what is truth, what is good, which is very, very important to know, to understand. So the human being of all times, Ratzinger thinks, prays because he cannot fail to wonder about the meaning of his life, which remains obscure and discomforting if it's not put in relation with to the mystery of God and of His plan for this world. So we can see a testimony of religious dimension and a desire for God. Of course, later, in Christian context, this looks like that that quest receives fulfillment and full expression in the Old and New Testament, etc. But this is already Christian context. But even before, long before Christianity, it's always about dependence on another superior to himself, to human, and on the source of every good, and to somehow to know him and to create a certain relationship. Also, praying is because man bears within him a thirst for the infinite, quest for beauty, desire for love, need for light and for truth. Again, what is truth? To know, to understand what is truth, what is good. Desire for God. So man knows in a certain way that he can turn to God. He knows he can pray to Him. Again, this is way before Christianity. So, and also includes Christianity later. So this attraction to God, which God Himself has placed in man, is the soul of prayer regarding Ratzinger. And this is the question, of course, how we are going to treat that other. So this is about that other and beyond. So he says that man's history has in fact known various forms of prayer, really many forms of prayer, with Christianity or without, because we as humans always we has developed different kinds of openness to that other and to that beyond. so that we may recognize prayer as an experience present in every religion and culture. So for Ratzinger, it's very important to understand this also when we are going to talk about prayer. So it's not exclusively and only Christianity. Man is the seeker of the absolute. That's it. So, I mean, this is basic. Also, for him, in Christian context, as I said, this is encounter. As I said, for Ratzinger, the truth is person. That person is Jesus from Nazareth. So for him, if we are going to talk in Christian context now, this is encounter not with an idea or with a project of life, but with a living person who transforms our innermost selves, revealing to us true identity as children of God. And that encounter with Christ renews our human relationships, directing them from day to day to greater solidarity and brotherhood in the logic of love. So for Ratzinger, it's extremely important, as I said before, not only to speak in nice theories, but then have this in our concrete life. So how we are going, who is my neighbor, and again, how I'm going to treat it, him or her. Which are my concrete deeds. So for him, this is very, very important. Is faith truly the transforming force in our life, in my life, or is it merely just one of the elements that are part of existence without being the crucial one that involves it totally? So for Ratzinger, this is crucial. If we are going to talk about faith in Christianity and what does it mean? Because, he says, the way God acted gives us a strong incentive to question ourselves on the reality of our faith, which must not be limited to the sphere of sentiment, of emotions, or, as I said, nice theories and nice words. Rather, it must enter into the practicality of our existence. That is, it must touch our everyday life and give it practical guidance. Because God did not stop at words, He showed us how to live. And this is for us very important, so to know, to understand also the prayer in this context. What the prayer means. So Ratzinger continues, which is the nature of prayer, of faith? Does it concern only myself? Do I live my faith alone? Of course, that act of faith is an eminently personal act. It happens in the deepest part of us and signals a change in direction through personal conversion. It's my life completely that changes, that is given a new direction. But this has to be seen through my concrete deeds toward that my neighbor, how I am going to treat him or her. So it is not only or not merely a matter of following Jesus' example as something moral, but of involving one's whole life in his way of thinking and acting. So we have to bear this in mind when we are going to also to talk about the prayer. This is very important background, and this is the reason. So as we can see here, prayer must lead Christians to knowledge and union in ever deeper love with the Lord, if they are able to think, act, and love like Him, in Him, and for Him. So this is putting this into practice. Learning the sentiments of Jesus is the way of Christian life. Of course, if we are going to talk about prayer, we have to say at least something very short about worship and that connection between prayer and worship. Later, you will see in those three questions, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I prepared those three questions at the end of the presentation. So those three questions exactly they involve some certain aspects of this presentation. One of them involves also this about the worship and the prayer. And here Ratzinger quotes St. Paul, who says, the old form of worship with animal sacrifices in the Temple of Jerusalem ended with the cross of Christ. And the supreme act of divine, this was, of course, cross of Christ was the supreme act of divine love, become human love. And this symbolic worship is now replaced by true worship. Of course, that it's not therefore spiritualization of true worship. On the contrary, it is true worship. Real divine human love replaces the symbolic and temporary form of worship, like with animal sacrifices, etc. So the cross of Christ is the true worship that corresponds with the reality of God and of man. In Paul's opinion, the epoch of the temple and its worship had already ended prior to the external destruction of the temple, which is in perfect harmony with the words of Jesus, who said and who had predicted the destruction of the temple and had also announced another temple, not made with human hands, the temple of his risen body. Regarding Ratzinger, the essence of prayer is in the experience of prayer, human creature expresses all his self-awareness, all that he succeeds in grasping his own existence, and at the same time he turns with his whole being to one, before whom he stands, directs his soul, which he expects the fulfillment of his deepest desires, help to overcome the neediness of his own life. In that turning to another, in directing himself beyond, lies the essence of prayer for Ratzinger, as an experience of a reality that overcomes the tangible and the contingent. So the prayer is that one that opens, that it's an openness and an elevation of the heart to God. So it becomes that personal relationship with God. So even if man forgets his creator, the living true God does not cease and call man to that mysterious encounter of prayer. And so this is exactly what we said at the beginning of this presentation, that this God of philosophers, which comes from, of course, from ancient Greek thought, is actually that one accessible now, and that one with whom we can create that concrete personal relationship. And this is, of course, exactly that part. And now in this segment of the presentation, we are going to say something more. This is now in a Christian context. And in this Christian context, we are going to say more about the prayer exactly from different aspects. So one of the aspects is the prayer in the context of Abraham's intercession for Sodom, where Ratzinger wants to show us how this special, let's say, like that special sort of prayer is actually a new idea of justice and brings a new idea of justice into play. Because it's, of course, as you know, that this is about when Abraham said that it would be unjust to punish all the inhabitants of the city indiscriminately. So, and he said if there are just 10 innocent people in the city, God has to do something else and not just to destroy the whole city. Abraham, he doesn't stop asking for salvation of the innocent in that city. And this is that new idea of justice comes into spotlight. Not that one, so this is justice, not that one that is limited to punishing of the guilty, as men do, but a different sort of justice. It's about divine justice that seeks goodness and creates it through forgiveness that transforms the sinner, converts, and saves him. So it's about that another new idea of justice, which is not about destruction and about punishing of the guilty, but which is about forgiveness and about transformation. So with his prayer, Abraham's prayer, he invokes not a merely compensatory form of justice, but rather an intervention of salvation, which taking into account the innocent, also frees the weak from guilt by forgiving them. Later we will again speak about the prayer and forgiveness. But this is a request which is based on the certainty that the Lord is merciful. So Abraham asks here God for something that is really his essence. Abraham knocks at the door of God's heart, knowing what we truly desires, and it's about forgiveness that interrupts the spiral of sin. And Abraham, in his dialogue with God, appeals exactly for this. So through this, Abraham's intercession, Sodom can be saved if there are even, as I said, 10 innocent people in it. And this is the power of prayer. So because Lord does not want the wicked to die, but rather through forgiveness that they convert and live. His desire is always to forgive and to save and to give life, to transform evil into good, etc., and not to destroy. And this is very important to understand how Ratzinger wants to show us what the prayer can be, how we could understand prayer also as this a new form of justice. And this is very important to have such awareness, to see this, to notice this. Of course, what is, for example, the true worship? Before we spoke, I already mentioned the relation, very short, the relation between prayer and worship and the destruction of the temple and that new spiritual temple. And here Ratzinger also said that true worship of God is giving oneself to God and to man and woman. And it's a love, and the true worship of God does not destroy, but again renew and transforms. Also, Ratzinger sees the book of Psalms as the school of prayer. Of course, we can't go into this also, but this is also one aspect how Ratzinger sees the prayer. Then this is also about how we can communicate with Him, how we can speak to Him, and in our words, in our language, to grow constantly in faith and love. One of the questions later will be about the prayer and what does it mean to pray authentically. So is it enough to pray in our own words, or we have to have some certain formulas and then certain prayers, etc. We'll later go into this. And again, he also speaks about the relation between meditation and prayer. Today, everything is full of meditation in internet. Everywhere you'll see meditate this, meditate like that, in this way, in that way, do this, do that. This is very good. This is healthy. This is important, etc., etc. So, I mean, then it's also good to see what Ratzinger thinks about the relation about meditation and prayer. So for him, it's of course it's a inner silence, it's a recollection, it's a reflection, it's but for him ultimately the very aim of meditation is to entrust ourselves increasingly to the hands of God. We trust and love, certain that in the end it is only by doing His will that we are going to be truly happy. So this is about the meditation. Of course, he speaks also about the art and prayer. But we can't go into this. More important to say, it's about the dialectic of prayer. So for Ratzinger, dialectic for prayer, which is key to read the entire history of salvation, is that we have a human cry from one side, and from another side we have divine response to that human cry. So that's the dialectic of prayer. In our prayer, the certainty of God's presence be given importance and be made present. And then prayer and gratitude, as I said, prayer and forgiveness, but are very important, and we will come to this. Also, the prayer and gratitude. Why this is so important to know, to be aware of this, because in the events of our life, we often, our mind works in that way that we are always focused to everything what is bad, what is problem, what is difficult for us. But we should also, which is normal, this is how our mind is constructed, But also we should see, or at least try to see, that the Lord has already protected us, guided us, helped us. So it's important to praise Him for what He has done and continues to do for us. Because, as I said, we are always focused on difficulties and on what is bad and what doesn't work. But it's often very difficult to see that there are already some beautiful things that come to us from the Lord. So for Ratzinger, this attentiveness, which becomes gratitude, is also very important, not just because I have to be grateful for something, but this is just because that gratitude creates in us a memory of the good, which is already here and present, and this helps us in dark hours. And this is very important, because when we are going to pray, very often we have something which is very difficult for us, and we are in some dark hours and dark night of the soul, let's say like that. So that memory about what is good and what already works in my life is very important, because such a kind of memory strongly sustains hope and tells us God exists, God is good, His mercy endures forever. So it's crucial, and it's really important to understand this, to be aware of this when we are going to talk about the prayer. Also, Jesus as a teacher in prayer for Ratzinger, of course, because we often ask, how do I pray? How do we pray? How much time I give to my relationship with God? Are people today given sufficient education and formation in prayer? And who can teach it? This is one of those three questions at the end of my presentation. So for Ratzinger, it's important to understand that is a gift. Prayer is a gift which nevertheless asks to be accepted. Is it a work of God, but demands a commitment and continuity on our part. So for Ratzinger, Jesus gives us very good experience, shows that his prayer, enlivened by the fatherhood of God and by communion with the Spirit, was deepened and prolonged in faithful practice, up to the Garden of Olives and the cross. So today Christians are called to be witnesses of prayer, precisely because our world is often close to the divine horizon and to the hope that brings the encounter with God. Ratzinger sees this aspect also. He speaks also about what is the fundamental attitude of our prayer. So what does it mean if we look at the Sermon on the Mount, in which Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." That purity of heart is that permits us to recognize the face of God in Jesus Christ. It's having about a simple heart, like the heart of a child, free from presumption of those who withdraw into themselves, thinking they have no need on anyone, not even God, etc. So, I mean, one of the crucial things is also to be pure in heart, and he explains here what does it mean and how to also understand this. So prayer opens us to receiving the gift of God, of His wisdom, which is Jesus Himself, in order to do the Father's will, etc. And then the prayer, about the prayer and the healing, it's very crucial. It's important today. Everything and everyone on the internet are about healing and what is healthy and how to heal ourselves. So for Ratzinger, prayer clearly entered the healing action of Jesus. So if we look at that example when he healed that deaf mute person, for that healing happened in the moment when from on the one side we have that compassion towards that person, and on the other hand we have that Father's response. So we have our compassion, we ask and for that person, and then we have Father's response. So for him, healing happens when we have that interaction between human compassion, and with this compassion asks God, enters into the relationship with God. and this becomes healing. So this is very important to understand and to see today, especially today. Then also Ratzinger's family as a school of prayer, of course, one of the first schools of prayer. Also the relation of prayer and Eucharist, one of the absolutely crucial one and very important. Then we have, of course, the priestly prayer of Jesus. Then we have about the prayer of Jesus on the cross and forgiveness. We enter into the question of forgiveness in that case of Abraham's intercession for Sodom. But here we can see what does it mean really in that prayer when Jesus was in extreme situation on the cross, and here he showed trust and his abandonment into God's hands, even when God seems absent, seems to be silent, complying with a plan incomprehensible to us. So Jesus invites us to take this very difficult step of also praying for those who wrong us, who have injured us, ever able to forgive. So that's God's life again can illuminate their hearts, because this is again about that transformation instead of destruction, as we said. So Jesus invites us to live in our prayers the same attitude of mercy and love and forgiveness which God treats us like in that Our Father prayer. Forgive us our trespasses and forgive those who trespass against us. So this is very deep. Of course, we can't go into more, but this is just one very important aspect among all other aspects how Ratzinger sees prayer. Then the prayer in the first Christian community, then the relationship between prayer and action, of course, which is very important because prayer is often seen just like as something passive and action is something active. So this is some kind of difference, and this is not connected, and etc. etc. This looks like the first view. But Ratzinger also says that saints, for example, have therefore experienced a profound unity of life between prayer and action, between total love for God and love for their brethren, so that this prayer is the breath of the soul and of life. Of course, he also speaks about the Holy Spirit as the master of prayer, very important. Or he also goes to talk about Our Father prayer. I just mentioned that in forgiveness part about our prayer, Our Father prayer, where Ratzinger said that this prayer actually, the Lord teaches us which are the priorities of our prayer, of how to clean and purify our desires, how to clean and purify our hearts. This is a way of accustoming oneself to being with God, brings into the being man and woman who are motivated then not by selfishness, by the desire to possess or by the thirst for power, but by gratitudeousness, desire to love, by the thirst to serve, in other words, who are motivated by God, and only this way it's possible to bring light into the darkness of this world. So this is very, very important for Ratzinger to understand, as well as Eucharist as a part of the liturgy and liturgy of the prayer, as the prayer relationship between. For Ratzinger is the first school of prayer. Of course, it's also sacred scripture and the Word of God. And this is also liturgy, which is a privileged context in which God speaks to each one of us here and now and awaits our answer. And fundamental, primary element of the dialogue with God in the liturgy is that agreement. This is very important, that agreement between what we say with our lips and what we carry in our heart. Again, what is true, what is good, not only in theory, but in concrete practice, as I mentioned several times. Still now again we came to this, as I said, always and always again, and from the beginning we are coming to those basics, those essentials. So this is why it's so important to have this in mind, to have certain awareness about this. And so at the end of this presentation, Ratzinger finished with the question, what is really necessary in my life? So when we are going to pray, it's important to also accept to pray, because we have problems, we have difficulties, we have this, we have that. Also, it's important to somehow to analyze ourselves, to reflect on ourselves, and to try to see what is really necessary in my life. And so Ratzinger answers with Saint Alphonsus, who says, health, what is the real necessary in my life? And Saint Alphonsus said, health and all the graces that we need. And of course, Ratzinger continues here that Saint Alphonsus means not only health of the body, physical body, but first of all of the soul, health of the soul, which Jesus gives us. So more than anything else, Ratzinger continues, we need his liberating presence, which makes us truly, fully human, and hence fills our existence with joy. And it's only through prayer, thinks Ratzinger, that we can receive him, his grace, which by enlightening us in every situation helps us to discern true God, and by strengthening us also makes our will effective. That is, renders it capable of doing what we know is good. Again, what is good, what is true. We often recognize what is good, but also we are unable to do it. And with prayer, we will succeed in doing it, because disciple of the Lord knows he is always exposed to the temptation and does not fail to ask God's help in prayer in order to resist it. Constant prayer, says Ratzinger, reawakens within us the sense of the Lord's presence in our life and in history. So the more and the better we pray with the constancy, with the intensity, the more like him we shall be, and he will truly enter into our life and guide it, bestowing upon us joy and peace. And the more we know, love, and follow Jesus, the more we will feel the need to pause in prayer with him, receiving serenity, hope, and strength in our life. So this is the end of this presentation. As I said, I also prepared three questions. So I'm just going to present those three questions and why I think that they are important. As I said, if you like to discuss whichever part of this, please feel free to contact me on this mail. You can see it here. So those three questions for possible discussion. First question is prayer as a kind of bridge between religion and spirituality. So, of course, is it possible to see prayer as a kind of bridge between religion and spirituality? So we have to see, first of all, what is religion, what is spirituality. There has been, Ratzinger says that, however, there has been no great civilization from the most distant epoch to our day which has not been religious. Man is religious by nature. So Ratzinger says the man is homo religius, as well as he is homo sapiens, homo faber, etc., etc., homo ludens, etc. So man feels the need to find light, to give response to the questions that concern the deep meaning of reality, a response to that he cannot find in himself, in progress, in science, and here and there. It's about the deepest existential questions which all religions or philosophies, all the human thought always is trying to respond, trying to answer, trying to find some solutions. So so among other, humanity develop really this in religious attempts, in religious forms. In his desire and for fulfillment and happiness. So those questions are, of course, what is man? Who am I? What is the meaning and purpose of life? What is upright behavior? What is sinful? Again, to know the truth. What is good? What is wrong? What is right? Where does suffering originate and what end does it serve? How can genuine happiness be found? What happens at death? what is judgment, what reward follows that, and finally, what is the ultimate mystery beyond human explanation, which embraces our entire existence, from which we take our origin and towards which we end. So, I mean, really, really extremely important to have such answers on some answers, some replies on those questions. Moreover, life without such a transcendent horizon would not have its full meaning and happiness for which we are all seek, as Ratzinger says. So man needs to open himself to something more, to something or to someone who can give him what he lacks, who can give him those answers. He must come out of himself toward the one who is able to fill the breadth and depth of his desire. So we need this. So that transcendental horizon. The question is where is that spiritual aspect? Is there a spiritual aspect beyond religious one? Or that transcendental horizon is only about and within the religious one or not? So how to perceive, how to understand that mentioned transcendent horizon? And this is that question. If we discuss this transcendent horizon and the difference between spirituality and religion, then we can see where the prayer is. And as I put this as a question, can we see the prayer as certain sort of bridge between spirituality and religion? Another second question is prayer. Can we see prayer as the part of temple, that non-geographical, non-biological one, as well as the path leading to kind of spiritual temple? So this is that part of the presentation where we already mentioned that the spiritual temple and that new temple, where Ratzinger quotes Saint Paul, etc. So this is very connected with various aspects Ratzinger discusses in Introduction to Christianity. Introduction to Christianity is one of his very famous books. And where, among others, he gives us example and gives us quotation from the Gospels, where Jesus said to her, to woman, "Believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father, but the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such a people to worship Him. God is Spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth." So again, so what is the relationship between worship and prayer? What is that new temple Jesus built? So this is second question. And the third, last question, I have mentioned it. It was about how to pray. What does it mean? And is it important to learn how to pray authentically? Or any honest prayer is good enough? What does it mean to pray authentically? This is about the relation between formal and informal prayer. What the prayer is at all, including here Christianity, of course, but also various other religions and traditions. So what does it mean? Is it enough if I'm just going to pray to say something from my heart? And this is the way how I enter that relationship with God, who is, as we said, God of the philosophers, but that one with whom you can have relation. Close relationship, that one who is interested in our lives and our problems and difficulties. So how I'm going to do this, and where are here all those other formal prayers, let's say like that, and what happens here? And so this is the question: is it really important to learn how to pray authentically? And this is just because in man's history, in fact, we know that humanity really has really various forms of prayer, because humanity always developed different kinds of openness to the other and to the beyond. So that we may recognize prayer as an experience present in every religion, in every culture. So again, this is something more and broader than Christianity itself. So, okay, those are three questions. And as I said, if you are interested in please contact me. We can always discuss more. But for this is okay. I really finished with this. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you that I hope you listen this till the very end, and so hope you found this interesting in some way, in some aspects, whatever, either if you know Ratzinger or you don't know him and his work, etc., or just some parts of it. I mean, hope you found this interesting. So thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice day. Bye.